This is an early draft I have saved of a collection of scrap Flipnote animations from about September 2022, which was about 2 months before the video was actually finished and uploaded. This was basically whenever I started editing this, I basically put all the audio down and put like the very basics of visuals to get everything like sorted out and organized on the timeline. And that included like, putting in some of the certain avatar poses and visuals I needed, and also putting in placeholders for things that I would still need to draw or add later, and stuff like that. And at a certain point during that editing process, I was adding in PNGs of like, for example, the Finding Dory poster and stuff. But I had the idea to like instead of just displaying the actual just regular poster in the video, I would like take pictures of the things I wanted to have with the Flipnote or with the 3DS camera, and put that in Flipnote to have a sort of like Flipnote effect to it, I guess. Because there's a thing where you can take a picture of things with the camera in Flipnote Studio, and then it'll like turn it into like a line art in a way. So I wanted to try doing that. So I figured, okay, that's going to be such a big shift in my editing direction and like visual presentation in the video that it might be fun to save this draft I have of this video right now, just to have like access to it later and like see how much has changed over time. Especially because this was my biggest editing project I had ever done. So I also thought it would be cool, like once I finally finished it, to be able to go back and see all the differences and stuff. So that's what this is, just a very basic early draft of the video. You'll see a lot of things like placeholder text where like certain visuals I want need to be. There's some mistakes like I believe at one point there's an avatar pose that's like not even chroma keyed properly. It's just like the full green screen thing, and I didn't fix that. There's no background music. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to look back on. This is in 360p because when I exported this, I didn't want it to take up too much storage space, and I didn't want to spend like a whole bunch of time exporting it. So that's why it's in 360p. So it's gonna look a little bit crusty. And one last thing, one very important thing, because this is an early draft, I had not done any sort of editing on the audio to like balance the audio and like make it sound better. So it's gonna sound really bad. And also because I didn't do any audio balancing, there are going to be like really sudden spikes in volume. So please, for the love of God, like keep your volume relatively low if you're listening to this, because it could hurt your ears. Um, but okay, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's go watch the early draft. Yippee! Oh, hey, hello, Mr. Placeholder Avatar Design here. So, on one fateful day in April of 2016, I decided to download Flipnote Studio 3D onto my 3DS to create my own animations, and that eventually led to me creating my own YouTube channel specifically to share them. I experimented with a bunch of different animation ideas, and of course that meant a lot of them ended up scrapped. I even had a channel specifically for posting scrap projects, but I only posted 3 projects there, when in reality there was a lot more than that. So that's why this here video exists, to show off those unfinished animations and the reasons I decided to trash them. I'm also going to go into detail about them. Lots of these barely had any progress done on them, so if I just showed you the animations without further context... Was that an animation or a cry for help? So I'm basically going to show the animations, then go into detail about what it would be about and the history behind the idea, and then I'll talk about why I ditched them. Sound good? Alright, because here comes the first one! So, this is where it all began, the first Flipnote animation I ever worked on. I first downloaded Flipnote Studio 3D in April of 2016. I could have started out by making a short or some animation test, but instead my first idea was, hey, I want to make my own animated series complete with an overarching plot and voice acting. Guess how that turned out? It's even weirder considering I had no plans to start my own YouTube channel until about a month later. This animation basically would have just been shared between me and my friends, similarly to the comic books we wrote at the time. So, this was essentially going to be an ambitious, episodic adventure series complete with voice acting and an ongoing narrative that would only be seen by myself and maybe 3 other people. Yeah, this idea was doomed to fail. Anyways, this series was going to be an adventure series about a sword-wielding hero who had traveled the world in order to stop evildoers. How original. This first piece of animation would have been the opening shot of the series, with the hero walking through a forest until he comes across a mountain. He'd be squinting his eyes and saying something like, what is that? And then the camera would quickly zoom to the top and reveal the wizard and floating orb on top. This wizard would have been the main antagonist of the series, using the magic orb to cause chaos and evil that the hero would have to stop. Again, how original! I'm pretty sure this second animation was supposed to be an alternate take for the opening. It would be the girl pointing up at something and yelling, "Look!" and then the following shot would have been the same mountain zoom-in from earlier. This character actually would have been the secondary protagonist of the series. She would have started aiding the hero on his journey after the wizard burned down her village. Once again, how original! Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted this series to have voice acting, but I'm honestly not sure how I would have done it at the time. I'm sure at the time I would have considered recording the audio in Flipnote itself, but by that point I didn't realize that the 3DS's mic and audio quality was just abysmal. If we had recorded it that way, it probably would have sounded something like,
What is that?
Actually, now that I think about it, that might have been funnier, but, you know. So, yeah, I don't really know what I would have done with the audio. I'm guessing I would have eventually figured out to record it on my iPad like I would eventually do with my YouTube channel. Or maybe I just would have scrapped the idea. Who knows? But anyways, I didn't end up working on this animation for too long because I just kind of lost interest in the idea. I think I've made it kind of clear earlier that it was not the most creative idea, so I didn't find it that fun to work on. Plus, this was around the time I started working on Mario vs. Sonic, and that was a pretty meaty project. Since I was much more passionate about that idea, I just decided to scrap the Adventure series entirely. Also, even if I did come back to it, come on, it clearly wasn't going to happen. You're going to see later on that a lot of other cancel ideas were way less ambitious than this, so if those didn't go through, there was absolutely no way I would have been able to finish this one. With that said though, in October of 2016, I actually went on to make a comic called The Legend of the Seven Swords, and that actually shared a lot of elements with the cancelled animation. The comic series took place in a fantasy setting where a sword-wielding hero would be joined by another character to stop an evil villain from using his powerful magic items to cause chaos. Obviously there were some differences between the two, such as Seven Swords' main character not being an established hero and stuff, but, you know, still. I don't think the comic was a direct retooling of the cancelled animation, but I think it's safe to say that at least the concepts of the idea lived on in that comic miniseries. A series that never got past the first issue. Yeah, I never finished it. I regret to inform you that we'll have to live the rest of our lives knowing that we'll never see such iconic characters as Robux the Cyclops ever again. Why did I name him that? So this one's actually the first of the animations I made for YouTube, although it wasn't for my channel specifically. Basically, back in early 2016, a friend of mine was making plans to start his own YouTube channel. His videos were basically going to be structured like a variety TV show, where every video had different segments hosted by different people. For example, one segment might have been a Let's Play, and then the next segment could have been an Amiibo review show, and then the next segment could have been news or something. I had recently downloaded Flipnote Studio, so I proposed the idea of animating stupid little joke commercials that would run between segments of the show. He liked the idea, so I ended up working on one. This would have been a commercial for a fake cereal called Cardboard Crunchies, which had been a running gag for years in comics I used to write. The whole joke of it was just that it's cardboard squares marketed as real food. Later versions of the joke had appetizing new flavors such as sewer sludge and rotten cheese, but this commercial probably would have just shown the original flavor to start off the joke. With that said though, I'm sure if the commercials became a mainstay on that channel, a variation of Cardboard Crunchies would have appeared in every single episode. Because if there's one thing you should know about my humor back then, is that I really liked running jokes into the ground. Eventually the channel was delayed for so long that he just kinda lost interest in doing it, leaving the Cardboard Crunchies idea in the dust for all eternity. Okay, not really. I actually ended up revisiting the idea in 2021 for a school project, although it was live action, not animation. Look, Cardboard Crunchies is in real life. Run! So here's another failed attempt at creating my own animated series, although this time I made even less progress. Ponyville was basically about a village of talking ponies going about their lives, and the whole joke would have been that they were always unrealistically happy. For example, there might be a meteor shower destroying the village, and they would be saying something like,
Oh boy, this makes me so happy!
The only plot idea I can remember was the first episode, where the ponies would have given the viewer a tour around Ponyville. Okay, so now I'm going to actually explain what these animations are supposed to be, because when it's played out of context like this, it looks like one of those brainwashing videos. The first thing I worked on was the theme song animation. This would have been a clip of a pony flying through the sky with a rainbow trailing behind them, with the title appearing at the end of the theme song. Unlike the other animated series I tried to make, I actually plan on having a theme song to go with this opening animation. I'm not really sure if I would have been the one singing it, or if it would have had an instrumental or anything like that, but this is a vague recreation of like the idea I had bouncing around my head at the time. I am so sorry you had to hear that. As you can probably tell, I only worked on a tiny bit of animation before I decided to save the theme song for later. It just would have taken a lot of time, and I wanted to finish the full episode first. And that brings us to this animation, which is supposed to be the first shot after the theme song. It's basically where the pony is introducing the viewer to the village, saying something like,
Hi, kids. Welcome to Ponyville.
as you can tell, I scrapped this very quickly for a couple of reasons, with one of them being the fact that, God, I hated lip syncing. You can even see this in my future animations too. Sans Beats Bill Cipher starred characters who didn't have mouths to move, and even when I did have characters with lips to sync, I just didn't bother with it and just had their mouths open up when they were talking because of how painful lip syncing was. The other big reason was because I really hated how the characters' proportions were changing a lot while they talked. This wasn't exactly a new problem for me because you could see that a lot in Mario vs. Sonic, but in that one the characters are always in motion, so it doesn't really matter. With this one, the pony's just standing still while it's talking, so it just looks bad. Looking back, I probably could have just copy and pasted the body of the pony and simply redraw the mouth on every frame, but even if I did that, I would still have to deal with lip syncing, so yeah, I just decided to scrap the idea entirely. And unlike the past two animations, I never decided to revisit this idea for a future project. And thank God for that. And wouldn't you know it, here's another attempt at an animated series, and this time I literally did the bare minimum amount. Yeah, this is it. This title screen's pretty much all I worked on for the series. The only other remnant of the idea is this folder I made for it, with a normal drawing of a guy with hair. Based on that drawing and the simple title, I'm pretty sure that the Bob life would have followed a normal guy named Bob who would end up in extremely abnormal situations. Oh my god, what a genius idea! How haven't I used this idea before? I'm sure the reason I didn't finish it was because I was trying to finish Mario vs. Sonic at the time, so I just wanted to write this idea down so I didn't forget it later. But evidently, once I finished the idea, I just forgot about the Bob life and never came back. I wonder why. So if you weren't already aware, Battle Royale Ultra was a series I used to make where I would pick two characters and have them fight each other to see who would win. Now, the main series focused on characters from popular video games, movies, stuff like that, but this spin-off would have involved characters from my own comic books. From around 2008-ish up until 2017, I wrote a ton of my own comic books, and WWR Comics was basically the name of a fake company that encompassed all of the comics that I and two other friends wrote from 2014 onwards. Since I was mostly making my animations for myself and my friends at the time, I guess I thought it would be fun to have our characters fight to the death or something like that. The character that's shown in this unfinished animation is basically a self-insert of myself, who is the main character of a series called The Colin Universe Adventures. Yeah, Narcissus is nothing compared to 11-year-old me. This series basically followed Colin and a group of other superheroes who were made up of my other friends as we fought against the forces of an evil cyborg overlord who wanted to take over the universe. All of the heroes had their own superpowers, and mine was the ability to create energy balls that could be thrown at opponents. They could also be connected together for various uses, such as a whip or a shield. And of course, let's address the elephant in the room. Oh my god, it's Sir Calco himself! Yeah, basically I used this design as my avatar for both Calco Animation Studios and eventually Sir Calco. That's why in the Calco Animation Studios intro, my avatar throws energy balls that appear in the channel logo. Congrats, you now know the Sir Calco avatar lore. There's no going back. I never got around to drawing the second character, but it definitely would have been Hydrogen Man, who was the star of a comic of the same name. Hydrogen Man was basically a standard superhero comic where Hydrogen Man would have to save a city from various villains whose powers were all based on the periodic table of elements, such as Zychroner and the Mercury Master. His main power was over fire, like he could shoot fire from his hands or concentrate it into his fists for more powerful hits. He could also fly, had light vision, and he could create waves of water for some reason. I chose Colin and Hydrogen Man to fight each other because they were both the flagship characters of the two main action comics that I wrote, to the point where they even had a crossover at some point. Which almost completely plagiarized the Sonic and Mega Man crossover that Archie did, but shh, don't tell them that. The winner of the fight would have been Colin. Yeah, I know, super narcissistic, but Hydrogen Man had a lot of powerful abilities, but I felt that the energy balls had a lot more utility to them, giving Colin the edge. I actually made an entire folder in Flipnote Studio for this series, so I must have had a lot of plans for it. The thumbnail on the folder actually shows a little more of what the future of the series might have been. The H represents Hydrogen Man, and the energy ball of course represents Colin Universe. The symbol in the middle is meant to be a Chomper, who are the stars of the series Chomper Days. This was a series that contained multiple comedic stories in each issue, all involving the wacky and zany Chompers. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Chomper Days was pretty similar to Ponyville. The main difference was just that Chomper Days had a lot more potential because they weren't restrained to the whole absurdly happy gimmick that I had for the ponies. So that's even more of a reason for those ponies to stay 6 feet under. Anyways, the 3 represents 3-page books, which were comedic short stories that were written in folded sheets of paper that contained 3 pages each. Lastly, the portal represents Professor Reynard, an adventure series that followed a young professor who had to travel through alternate dimensions to find the source of a multiversal threat. I'm pretty certain that if the series ever continued, the second battle would have been a Chomper from Chomper Days and the French Pig from 3-page books, since they were both my funny haha comic series. Episode 3 definitely would have had Reynard since his logo was on the folder. I'm guessing that the other character for that fight would have been Agent Ian, who was the main character in a spy miniseries I made called Atow. But obviously, the series clearly never made it off the ground. The final was created while I was still working on Mario vs. Sonic, so I'm assuming I wanted to finish that up before I worked on anything else. But by the time I had finally finished it, I had already started up my YouTube channel, so I wanted to work on other projects for that instead. I mean, I could have still worked on WWR Battle Royale and uploaded it to my channel, but those comics were never posted anywhere online, and they were pretty much just shared between 2 of my friends. So basically, there were only 3 people on the entire planet that would have understood that series. And even if I was an absolute moron and decided to go through with the idea anyways, Battle Royale was exhausting due to how much time it took, so I probably would have scrapped it anyways to focus on the main series. So basically, therefore, in conclusion, that was such a dumb idea. Why did I even consider it? And now we've finally reached the stuff that was made specifically for YouTube, since this animation was in my YouTube folder in Flipnote. This was basically going to be a fake trailer for some sort of sloth movie. The movie itself was never going to be a thing that I made, it just existed to be a subject for a trailer parody I wanted to do. The entire joke of the video would have been that it was a dramatic and over-the-top trailer that starred really slow and boring sloths. Woo! I worked on this a few months after Zootopia released, so I'm pretty sure that the sloth scene in that movie was a direct inspiration, directly plagiarized idea for this. The first frame is supposed to be a parody of movie trailer thumbnails that you'd see online. Since I didn't have any sort of photo editing software, I had to draw it myself in Flipnote Studio, and yup, it sure is beautiful. I'm guessing I planned on using it as the actual thumbnail for the video, but I'm guessing that wouldn't have happened because it took me way too long to learn how to upload custom thumbnails. The next frame was a parody of movie trailers, referencing those green text ratings that showed up before trailers. The only actual animation that I worked on was the text coming soon that was zooming into the camera, but apparently I couldn't even finish something as simple as that. I don't remember disliking the idea or anything, so based on the date listed on this file, I'm assuming that I came up with the idea for Sans Meets Bill Cipher at the time, and I decided to make that instead. And I guess I just forgot about the sloth movie trailer. Oopsie. Yeah, so I'm sorry I didn't have a whole lot to say on this one, but were you really expecting much development history for something called the sloth movie trailer? What's wrong with you? So this one's actually pretty unique because I actually confirmed its existence in an update video.
I'm also going to have a new animated series after that. I won't say much about it, but it will be about Wario and his adventures. And I know I'm going to need a lot of voice actors. And not just Buzz and Nene, I'm probably going to need a lot more.
The series would have been called Wario's Amazing Adventures, and it was actually based on an idea I'd come up with back in 2015. I spent a lot of time in late 2015 and early 2016 on fan wikis, specifically the Super Mario Fanon wiki. I wrote a lot of my own content and ideas for that wiki, including such classics as Flappy Swooper and Super Mario Moose. The pages actually varied in the amount of content on each of them, but one of my biggest pages was about an animated series about Wario. The show was basically about Wario's life in the Mushroom Kingdom and all the wacky hijinks he would get into, such as robbing banks, getting into fistfights, and cooking. By May of 2016, I had come up with 12 different episode titles, and I even had complete plots for 4 of them. Honestly, the main reason I wanted to make this is because I thought it would be cool to animate an idea that I had already come up with a while ago. I'm not really sure how to explain why, but for some reason doing something like that just makes it a lot cooler to me. This clip is pretty much everything I animated for the series, and it's supposed to be the intro animation. The intro would have followed the wiki description word from word. The camera would zoom out on a question block and reveal Wario. He would then hit the block and they would reveal coins that spell Wario's Amazing Adventures. He would then collect the coins and run away, as Waluigi says the show's title. Jesus, no wonder I didn't finish much of it. That would have been a nightmare to try to animate. Can you imagine that? I never got around to animating the actual episode itself, but the first video would have followed the plot of the first episode on the wiki, which was Wario's Welcome. It was basically just an introduction to the series' world and characters, as Wario shows the viewers around the Mushroom Kingdom. Not really anything too complicated. As I mentioned in the update video, I was going to need a ton of voice actors due to the sheer number of characters and voice lines that would be required. The series never really got to the point where we could actually record the lines for it, but I already did have some voice actors in mind. Wario would have been voiced by my friend Peter, who went by Everything is Awesome at the time. You might know him as the voice of John Cena in Sonic Meets His Match, and yes, I'm sure he has that on his resume. With that said, of course I still wanted to voice the character, so I decided that I would voice Waluigi. Waluigi wasn't the main character of the show, but he was in every episode and almost every scene, so he got a lot of screen time. Besides those two mainstays, there are a ton of side characters to find roles for. One of these was Moneybag Banks, a money bag that ran the Mushroom Kingdom Bank. He would constantly be at odds at Wario because, Wario being Wario, he would always be robbing the bank. I had pinned down Moneybags' voice actor as my brother Noah, who had appeared on my gaming channels but not in animation yet. I don't really know why I chose him, since this character isn't really an obvious fit for him. I don't know. There were a bunch of characters that I apparently just didn't find actors for. This includes Robo Koopa, a skilled Koopa who is friends with Wario, Bluetone Pumbaa the Police Goomba, members of the police force, Baby Mario and Baby Luigi who appear as antagonists in the second episode, and New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Not the game, it's the name of a character. Yes, I'm being serious. The only reason that character actually exists is because someone made a page for the actual game New Super Mario Bros. Wii on the fan wiki. So I created that character with the same name just so that we could have the page be about something fan-made and not like an existing game. But anyways, I didn't really have any voice actors set for those characters. It's safe to say that Buzz and Nene definitely would have been a part of it since they had been voices previously, but apparently I didn't really have any specific roles in mind for them. So I'm sure the main reason this was cancelled is painfully obvious by now. It was way too ambitious. Each episode would have a full-length plot and script, a legion of voice actors to work on it, and a painful amount of animation work to do. I mean, it was pretty much going to be on par with an average TV animated series at that point. Just going by the plot synopsis I had written out, these episodes were probably going to be a whopping 11 minutes each. And if you combine that with the fact that I'd have to do a ton of syncing for the voice acting, which was already tough enough to do in single-minute animations, these probably would have taken me like 6 months at minimum for each episode. Thankfully, I realized this pretty quickly, so I scrapped the series about a week later. I ended up leaving the cancellation notice in the comment section of the update video I announced it in, although it was buried in the replies with a different comment, talking about how the Call No Gaming channel had been deleted. Yeah, cool fact about that update video, half of the things I mentioned in it became irrelevant after just 1 week. But yeah, I decided to can the series, because if I actually went through with the idea, we would probably just now be getting episode 3. Oh no, was that another animated series attempt? New Movie Mishaps was another different case like the Wario series, because I actually went out of my way to announce it, although this time instead of my YouTube channel, it was announced on the Calco Animation Wiki. No, you're not hallucinating, this is a real thing that exists, and yes, I know it's dumb. New Movie Mishaps was, as I described it at the time, basically short animations I make where something stupid happens in the universe of a recent movie. These will only be movies that I know a good amount about, and they will come out on the day the movie releases. I originally wanted the first episode to be based on Finding Dory, but I had to scrap that animation due to time constraints because I literally came up with the idea 4 days before the movie's release date. I ended up posting the scrapped animation to the Calco Animation archives. So I ended up making a blog post on the Calco Animation Wiki explaining that the Finding Dory animation was cancelled, but New Movie Mishaps as a series wasn't. Instead, the first animation in that series was going to be based on Independence Day Resurgence. Honestly, the only real reason I chose that movie was because it was the closest to release at the time, and I was vaguely familiar with the original, at least enough to where I thought I could make an animation based off of it. In reality though, I just didn't care about the original Independence Day at all, so I just had no interest in making it. This also led to New Movie Mishaps as a series getting cancelled as well. I really only wanted to make that series because it capitalized on the hype of new movies, and it would get more views, so I was never truly passionate about the idea. So, since I never cared about the idea to begin with, and because the release dates were just going to cause a lot of stress, I decided it was best to get rid of the series for good. Not the wiki though, that's still around. That thing's probably going to outlive me. Okay, so this next one is the last scrapped Flipnote that I have, and it's a big one, so hold on to your hats and or hair because here we go! Yep, that's right. It's the infamous Episode 2 of Battle Royale Ultra that was teased at the end of Mario vs. Sonic, Iron Man vs. Batman. If you weren't already aware, Battle Royale Ultra was basically a series where I picked two characters from various media and had them fight each other to see who would win. It was pretty much identical to other pop culture deathmatch thingies such as Death Battle and Cartoon Fight Club. Initially, my plan for the series was to have the episodes released monthly. Mario vs. Sonic was uploaded in late May, and at the end of the episode I teased Iron Man vs. Batman for late June. As for what I had finished, the bulk of it was the introduction, which featured a new segment that went into detail about each fighter's capabilities. These were used in the Death Battle and Cartoon Fight Club videos, but initially I didn't want to include them in mine because I felt like they took way too much time out of the video. I decided to include it starting with this episode though, with the compromise being that it was short and to the point so it didn't take too much time out of the video. The only other animation I finished was this. Hire me, Disney. This was going to be the opening shot of the battle, showing Iron Man hovering in midair and looking out into the distance. After that, Batman probably would have appeared and attacked or something like that. Yeah, it's pretty obvious I spent very little time on this, especially considering how basic the shot is. I definitely would have gone back to fix the flickering and adding more details later on, but, you know, there's a reason it's in this video. Actually, the only real reason I made that was to have a teaser for the episode in my channel trailer. I hadn't started on the video by that point, but since the channel trailer was going to show clips from my other videos, I thought it might be kinda neat to have a little teaser for a future animation in there. The thing is though, the animation I put in the channel trailer was the same unfinished garbage that I showed you earlier, so I think all it did was scare people. I made all of that animation in one day, and after that I never touched the project again. And yeah, this is gonna shock you, but it was scrapped due to how long it would take. Mario vs. Sonic took me an entire month to animate at the time, and while I'm still proud of the results to this day, it was exhausting to work on. The fact that I originally planned on doing this series monthly still baffles me. To do that, I would have to essentially work on Battle Royale Ultra exclusively, and even then I would have to cut out a lot of corners to get there. Plus, I had a lot more fun working on smaller scale and less exhausting animations. I liked working on a variety of different ideas instead of having to stick to the same pop culture punchy fighty format all the time. I never officially announced the series cancellation, but it was never going to be finished in any capacity, so people would have realized it anyways. Okay, lastly, since I'm sure you're wondering who would have won the fight, it was going to be Iron Man. My reasoning at the time was that Batman had a lot of gadgets and tools at his disposal, but it couldn't really beat a metal suit that could fly and shoot giant lasers. Nowadays I don't think the result is as simple as that, but to be completely honest with you, I don't know enough about Batman to come to a conclusion. My experience with Batman starts and ends at Batman Arkham Origins on the Wii U. Do you really think I'm qualified to talk about this? Also, since you're probably wondering, Episode 3 was planned to be Bill Cipher versus Azrael Dreamer, and Bill Cipher was going to win that because Azrael actually has a conscience, and Bill doesn't, so he's a lot more ruthless. I actually have an old document where I wrote down a bunch of different ideas for future battles, but yeah, those aren't going to happen. Look, I'm sorry that I'm not going to make them, but if you really want to see Elmo vs. Barney, make one yourself. I dare you. So that's it for the Flipnote animations that were scrapped entirely, but I also happened to find some cut content from animations that I already released. So the first video I posted to Calco Animation Studios, Welcome to the Channel, was just a slideshow of text I wrote in the app, since I literally made it 5 minutes before filming the video. It turns out though, there are actually 2 more text slides that weren't shown in the video. It's nothing really amazing though, it's basically just a copyright like what appears at the end of all of my animations, and then a final slide saying, END. I'm pretty sure it was only cut because I stopped recording the video before they showed up, and I didn't really feel like it was necessary to keep. The rough draft file for Sans Meets Bill Cipher has this as the first frame. This was probably going to be the thumbnail for the video, since the two never made these poses in the actual animation, and they're in poses that would make for a good thumbnail. It was scrapped because I was a stupid idiot and couldn't figure out how to upload custom thumbnails to YouTube, as I established earlier. The frame isn't in the final animation file, so I must have ditched the idea before I started recording. The original credits for DDD's New Problem listed me and my brother as DDD and Kirby, respectively. The original plan was to have us as the two voice actors, but since Buzz and Nene were visiting at the time, I asked them to do it instead because I wanted to have some more variety in my voices in the animations. The file that holds these original credits was last edited on the same day that I uploaded the video, so it was most likely a last-minute decision. It's also worth noting that Noah was listed as Mythical Critic. I guess this is what he planned to call his YouTube channel around that time, but he eventually went with Critical Shot when he started the channel 2 months later. And that name only lasted 2 weeks before he changed it yet again. Oops. Lastly is this frame of Kara talking from Sans Has No Regrets. Unlike everything else I've shown, this frame actually appears in the final video I posted to YouTube, during the segment where Kara is taunting Sans. So Flipnote animations have a limit of 999 frames per animation, so I had to make a separate file for when Kara speaks, because due to hitting the frame limit in the original animation file, that part goes by way too fast for me to say anything. So that's why in the final video, the video just cuts to a single frame just to show Kara talking. Wow. When I was remastering the animation in 2020 though, I realized that I could edit the scene to have that original speaking frame last longer, and then overlay the voice lines on top of that to make it more seamless and not terrible. So because of that, you could technically sorta consider this frame scrapped content for the remaster, I guess. Also, a neat little thing about this file, I recorded a small part of Megalovania on my 3DS just so that the music would play while I was speaking, but since that animation only has a single frame, it only plays a single frame of the song, which means when it's looping, it sounds like this. Honestly, I wish I had left my 3DS volume on while recording this. It would have made the scene a lot more entertaining, even if it sounded bad.
Why don't you stay still? You can't dodge forever. I'm tired of playing around.
And there we go. That's 40 minutes of your life you're never getting back. I'm so sorry. Honestly, I'm really glad to have this stuff documented after all these years. A lot of this stuff was never really announced anywhere, and in some cases, I think I'm the only person who's ever seen these. So now instead of only one person knowing about their existence, there can now be 4 or 5. I really do enjoy looking back at these projects because of how experimental everything was, and just exploring forgotten ideas and the stories behind their development. Even if Flipnote Studio was limited in a lot of ways, and even if these animations could be stressful to work on at times, they're what led me down the creative path that I'm leading today, which is cool, yet also really weird to think about. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything. With all that said, bye, and just remember, no matter how bad the world can seem at times, at least we don't live in the timeline where Ponyville was finished.